Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder, treason, and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Remember, remember the 5th of November, though it seems that fewer and fewer people actually do. Or if they do remember, they simply no longer care all that much. These days, Bonfire Night, or if you prefer, Guy Fawkes Night in Britain, has been largely overtaken in the public affections by the considerably cooler Halloween. A holiday that is still viewed as a questionable American import by some and a gateway to satanic possession by others, but which is less about celebrating the execution of political prisoners and anti-Catholic sentiment than the more traditional British event. Halloween allows people to dress up and party, enjoy horror films, which are apparently only allowed for 1 month a year if social media is to be believed, and indulge in ghoulish fun, the sort of which was never available to kids when I was growing up. Back then, Halloween was usually ignored with bloody-minded determination by the media. At best there would be a lazily programmed screening of one of the Halloween movies, but rarely anything else. If you were a horror-mad kid, as I was, then this was a constant source of frustration. So I'm more than happy that this particular aspect of American cultural creep has been successful. That plus the fact that in truth I was never really a fan of the November the 5th traditions anyway. I quickly outgrew getting excited at the whiz-bang of fireworks, and soon realised that they were the sort of thing that oafs and yobbos were into as a way of terrorising both animals and people alike. My disillusionment with fireworks began when the actuality failed miserably to match the promise that had me cowering with fear and anticipation, only to see some dismal rocket fly unevenly upwards, pop like an unenthusiastic bottle cork, and then fall to the ground. Small pleasures for even smaller minds, I decided. I also hated treacle toffee, which seemed not only unpleasant in taste, but the sort of thing that put you at risk of losing your teeth. I enjoyed a toffee apple, I wasn't a complete monster, but all the rest of it was something that I could happily live without. Don't even get me started on parking. Admittedly, for me, Bonfire Night is also intrinsically linked to the Cub Scouts, an organisation that my parents forced me to join and insisted that I went to the weekly meetings and extracurricular events for, all of which were dreadful and often seemed to involve going from house to house asking strangers for money or household junk, something that I both assume and hope is no longer encouraged. It was awful. This is, admittedly, a very personal connection, but it is one that has done nothing to endear Bonfire Night to me. There are still plenty of people who see November the 5th as culturally important, one of those great British traditions that we should cling to, especially in a world where apparently everything that angry people hold dear is being whittled away at and banned by the forces of wokeness and the nanny state. Much like the war on Christmas, you can guarantee that each year there will be outrage stories about local councils under the cosh of Johnny Foreigner banning firework displays. But more often, these Bonfire Night events fall foul of budget cuts and a deteriorating public interest. Bonfire Night is not, in the grand scheme of things, all that big a deal for many people anymore. Only in places like Lewis is it still a big deal to burn some effigy of a right-wing bogeyman. While public displays are on the decline, Bonfire Night and Halloween and the weeks leading up to both, as well as several weeks afterwards, remains the time when local oafs will let off all the fireworks that their ill-gotten income allows them to buy, which is usually enough to recreate a war zone for several days. These days, fireworks are a controlled substance. How controlled depends on where you are, admittedly. In the past, when the firework was judged entirely on its explosive power, its ability to fly out of control, and the speed at which the blue touch paper would burn, Or better yet, stopped burning until some foolhardy person went to investigate, at which point it started up with mere seconds to scramble to safety, and where small children could leave the local corner shop, arms laden with high explosives and no questions asked. The packaging back then was all. Of course, most fireworks offer a brief blast of sparkly colour, but on the boxes they were madly spiralling space rockets, atomic bombs, or Lovecraftian creatures from beyond, possessed of names that only the most deranged and determined marketeer could conceive of. Even the most cynical of kids could be tricked into hoping that this firework, with its promise of apocalyptic explosions, might actually not turn out to be a damp squib. We were still always disappointed. This art has that fascinating combination of nostalgic imagery, extravagance, and wishful thinking that makes it irresistible even for a firework hater like myself. Private bonfires are less popular these days, the appeal of having a raging inferno in your backyard being somewhat diminished and likely to raise eyebrows with the neighbours. And fireworks are less of a haphazard affair. Obviously, everyone will have a neighbour who will be setting off fireworks endlessly. It's something that appeals to a particular type. But they are now in the minority. But back in the day, organised displays were still the exception and homemade affairs all the rage. Grubby little kids would gather wood from wherever they could find it, in the street, in the park, on wasteland, or part of people's fences, and would either deliver this to their parents for construction or more likely take matters into their own hands. It was not uncommon for kids back in the day to build bonfires on bits of wasteland, often sitting guard over their construction day and night to prevent rival gangs from raiding and stealing their wood. This would then culminate with armies of kids gathered around a massive bonfire with illicitly obtained fireworks and the joy of apocalyptic destruction that only kids can ever manage to have. Back in the day, nobody seemed especially concerned about the potentially problematic combination of small children and delinquent teens, fire, explosives, and unsupervised nighttime gatherings in the sort of places that adults might think twice about visiting after dark. Of course, such a devil-may-care attitude led to injuries and death, so the approach to Bonfire Night was also a time when traumatizing public information films would appear on TV, warning of the seemingly endless dangers that even the mildest firework like a sparkler could hold. Kids were terrified, but not terrified enough to actually stay away.
There's a child whose life has changed in the last year. He's given up football because he can't see the ball too well. He can't cross the road alone because he can't be sure it's clear. And he won't see much of the fireworks this year because last year a firework was thrown and blew up in space. Somewhere there are other children whose lives are going to be changed. Will one of them be your child?
The build-up to Bonfire Night would see kids making their Guy Fawkes effigy to burn on the bonfire, and then demanding a penny for the guy from strangers on the street. The more delinquent the child, the less effort would have gone into the guy, who was usually an old jumper and a pair of trousers stuffed with hay or newspapers, with a plastic mask topping it off. Similarly, these ruffian children could make menacing demands as they lurked outside corner shops, and woe betide you if you took them at their word and just gave them a penny. Of course, these guys were often nightmarish figures, especially if the kids went to the effort of making their own head. There's a fine line between charmingly homemade and hideously grotesque, and these effigies often straddled it, if not tipping entirely into the side of the latter. I imagine that this is all something that's rather frowned on now as well. Certainly I can't remember the last time that I saw kids with an effigy begging for money. I guess that it might still happen out in the rural sticks where traditions die hard. Have you encountered any? Let us know in the comments. Similarly, other Bonfire Night traditions, the treacle toffee, the bobbing for apples, the local delinquents throwing bangers around willy-nilly, and the public information film warning of the horrors that await, now seem in terminal decline. Perhaps they remain culturally important in some places, but certainly in the bigger towns and cities, Bonfire Night now feels more like an obligation than a pleasure, something that local authorities have to cater to and TV broadcasters have to enthuse about in order to placate a dying generation. I doubt that it will ever make a real comeback. Halloween is much more merchandisable, much more inclusive in the best meaning of the word, and much more fun for kids who've never even grown up with the Bonfire Night traditions. But perhaps Guy Fawkes has had the last laugh. Not only has the night celebrating his death diminished in cultural importance, but he's now less the demonised terrorist and more the icon of resistance, thanks to his character being assimilated into Alan Moore's V for Vendetta, and the Guy Fawkes image from that book being adopted first by Anonymous and then taken up by other groups around the world, few of whom even know what November the 5th represents. In that sense, Guy Fawkes Night has become international, but with a new and continually evolving anti-government, anti-authoritative narrative that has been used by both sides of the political extreme. I imagine that he might be quite happy about that. Are you a fan of Bonfire Night and its traditions, or are you glad to see the back of it? Let us know in the comments. As ever, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a like and a share, and if you've yet to do so, why not subscribe? It costs nothing and we have a fine body of work on this channel for you to explore. And if you want to give the Overlooked Hotel a penny for the guy, it will be much appreciated. Actually, I think that the Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube donation minimums are a bit more than a penny, but still. For less money than you would spend on a low rent firework, you can help keep this channel going. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.